going to kill everybody on the road.
Congratulations, that's a felony.
I'm not sure if it's a real police officer.
And I'm sure stuff like that you can buy on eBay.
It's a little bit sad, eh? Today we're going to answer a subscriber's question, and this one's directed to you, Greg. So, you ready for this?
I'm ready.
Question. Could you have this officer that always helps you do a video about people impersonating officers? I've seen a few BodyCamBust videos about that, but I wouldn't know a real officer from a fake one, seeing some of the equipment these posers have. Thank you. Greg, so let's start off. Did you ever meet a fake cop in your life?
Yeah, we had a guy impersonating a police officer in my division several years ago. And finally, we did finally get this guy into custody. But what he was doing was he had purchased like an old police car. It was an old Crown Victoria. It wasn't a marked police car. It was all black. But he outfitted it with emergency equipment, you know, the red lights and everything, and he was making vehicle stops. Now, this guy wasn't wearing like a uniform. He was more posing as like a plainclothes cop. But that was my experience with someone who was impersonating an officer.
Was he driving around in a car and then pulling people over, or was he like...
Exactly what you're... Yeah, he was driving around my division, this one area called the Midway area, and he was making vehicle stops.
And what was he doing exactly?
He was giving, lecturing people on their driving and then giving them a verbal warning. He wasn't arresting anybody, but still, he was impersonating, a police officer.
Oh, so it was more like a power trip, I guess.
Yeah, like the cherub of justice, so to speak.
So this is my question about the vehicle. What do police agencies do with their older police cars? Like, are there rules where they gotta like rip things off, scrape the paint off, or do they just sell the cars as is when it's time to renew the police vehicles?
Yeah, what they'll do is they'll remove any of the logos, the stickers on there that would identify it as a police car. A lot of times not always, but I know my agency, they would just spray paint the white doors so they're black. I mean, it looks like crap, but it's, black spray paint. And then all of the police equipment, they're not going to have police radios, obviously. They rekey the car because police departments usually have what they call a fleet key. So one key will open and operate all the cars in the fleet. So they'll rekey it to where that one key won't work on it needs its own specific key. And yeah, just any markings or insignias that would identify it as a police car are removed. Usually they'll still have the spotlights on the sides and the push bumpers. Quite often they'll leave the push bumpers on. And then where the antennas were, they'll plug those up with like a rubber cap. Okay.
So basically, if I were to go out and purchase a old police vehicle, it would be pretty easy for me to retrofit it to make it look like a police car that's in service.
Yeah, and the guy I was talking about earlier, who was posing as like a plainclothes officer, he was the vehicle he purchased was a unmarked vehicle, so it didn't have, it wasn't black and white. It didn't have white doors. It was all like jet black. So, you put some official lighting on that. There are websites you can go on, Amazon probably now, but there are definitely websites that sell emergency lighting equipment for, they're marketing it for security companies. But also, I'm guessing a lot of the smaller agencies probably buy their equipment through these sites.
Let's focus on the topic of lighting. What are some of like the different lightings? Like, what are the lightings that you can put if you're a police officer versus an ambulance versus a road worker? Are there certain color codes that we should be aware of?
Yeah, in California, the police lighting it's red and blue, and the primary color is red. So as long as they have like a solid, like say a plain unmarked vehicle, if they have a solid red light to the front, then that is emergency lighting, and they can pull you over with that car. A civilian cannot drive with a solid red. Now a patrol vehicle is going to have red and blue and strobe lights going off all over the place. And for police, fire and ambulances in California, or definitely San Diego, it's going to be just solid red. So there's not going to be any blue lighting at all. I know a lot of states in the United States, their police vehicles, it's just blue, like, blue flashing lights. So definitely blue is an indicator in the country as overall. But yeah, if you see any, you're not going to see any in California, like you said, road workers or anything using red lighting. That being said, in other states, like in Oklahoma, for example, and states I've been to, you'll see road workers with red flashing lights to the front, which would not be permitted here in California. So you really need to know what the emergency vehicles are using in your specific state, because it's kind of all over the place.
How easy is it to get official police gear out there? Like, obviously you could get gear that looks closely to what a police officer has on, but do they have certain types of gear that it's exclusive to the cops, or if someone wants to get that gear, they could get it fairly easily?
Well, when you're saying gear, you talk about like gun belts and things like that?
Correct. And badges, you name it.
Well, yeah, badges are issued by the department, and so those wouldn't be as easy to find. There are, fake badges out there, like security badges that look like pretty official. And, I'm sure you could get those probably on eBay. But as far as the gun belts and things like that, it's the same kind of leather gear that a lot of security companies use. So anybody could buy the web gear, the leather gear and the web gear, which is more nylon type stuff. But all that can be purchased by anyone pretty much. You can get them online.
If someone's driving on the road, whether it's a highway or a local road, and they see a car behind them, whether it looks like an official police car or an unmarked car, and they turn on their lights, and you're not 100% sure if this is a legit police officer, what should you do? What are the processes to go over to make sure you don't get into harm's way?
That's a tough one. I mean, the incidents of people impersonating police officers are actually fairly rare. It's not something that happens all that often. I mean, I was a police officer for 30 years, and I can probably count on both hands, at least, the incidents that I knew of. So my advice would be to not try to evade, but just, maintain legal speeds and then pull over into a well-lit area, hopefully with other people milling about, a parking lot or something. That's what I would suggest. Or you could even, nowadays with the hands-free stuff, dial 911 and say, hey, I have a vehicle behind me trying to pull me over. I'm not sure if this is a cop or not. Can you tell me if someone is trying to pull me over? This is where I'm at. That would be a good idea. Now, again, with everybody has wireless, cell phones nowadays, so that would be a pretty easy remedy, I think.
So basically call 911.
Yeah. If you're not sure that it is actually a police officer, that's what I would suggest. That'd be the easiest way to not get into any trouble, because if that is a police officer behind you and they're trying to stop you and you're not stopping, you have it's a failure to yield. You have an excuse. You're not 100% sure that that's a cop, because maybe they're driving a vehicle that's not painted with black and white or blue and white, whatever that state uses. You would probably get out of being arrested or anything with that excuse. But I'd say what I would suggest is dial 911.
If I'm being pulled over by an unmarked car, right? that pretty much looks like a civilian car, and they just have lights. If it's actually a cop, right, and I don't pull over right away, I could maybe get away with not getting into trouble.
Well, I think the excuse of, look, this isn't a typical vehicle that police officers are driving around here. There's no official markings on the car. All you were using to pull me over were red lights. I didn't know if you were a cop or not. So before I wanted to make sure I was safe before I yielded. No one's going to arrest you. Well, I'm not going to say no one, but I don't think any court would convict on something like that. And I honestly doubt that any city attorney's office would issue charges on an excuse like that, as long as you're maintaining, again, legal speeds and you're not trying to evade.
Okay, I hear you. And what about if you're interacting with someone in the street, because there are some examples in the internet where they pose as a police officer, they pretend to be a police officer, and you're not sure. Is it always back to the first remedy that you brought up? If you're being pulled over, just call 911. And can you call 911 and say, hey, I have this gentleman in front of me, but I'm not sure if it's a real police officer?
Well, one thing I would suggest is to ask to see their ID, because a badge is one thing, but in addition to a badge, we're issued official police ID that's going to have your photo on there. It's going to have the signature. I'm speaking of San Diego PD right now. It's going to have the signature of the chief on it. It's an official ID. I would ask to see that. I would be surprised if these folks posing to be cops, went as far as to make a fake ID. But yeah, 911 is always an option too. Or ask them, hey, I want a supervisor here. See what they do.
Okay. So legally, do cops have to bring in a supervisor if you ask for a supervisor?
Well, that would be a department policy issue. But I know in San Diego County, all of the agencies in San Diego County, if you're requesting to see a supervisor, they're going to call for a supervisor to come to the scene.
All right. So we have some examples of fake cops. I'd like to watch it with you and give us your thoughts on these incidences.
Oh, sure.
For a little bit longer. All right, take a look at this. We just received new video of a man facing charges after police say he impersonated an officer in downtown Atlanta. According to Atlanta police, an on-duty officer was patrolling parking lots on Sunday when he spotted a person who appeared to be an off-duty police officer working security in a parking lot. Now, that officer noticed that man's uniform was slightly off, his body camera different, and he appeared to be nervous. The officer called two of his supervisors, and they said they'd never seen the man before. So he was arrested. Police are putting this out there, asking anyone who might have come across this person to come forward and help with their investigation.
So I have a question, Greg. I heard the news reporter say an off-duty police officer working security. We don't have that here in Canada. Can you explain a little bit about that in the States? Like you could be a police officer and you could do private gigs?
Well, that's an agency-specific thing. There are some agencies. In fact, San Diego Police Department, you're allowed to work a second job or a security gig for a company off-duty as long as it's approved by the department. So you have to go through a process of, to basically get approval by the chief's office. But yeah, it is a thing. And I know, like with San Diego, you're not allowed to work in off-duty security detail and wear a San Diego police officer's uniform. You're going to be wearing whatever uniform that company offers. There's a company here in San Diego called ODO, which stands for off-duty officer, and they're wearing like a polo shirt and it says ODO on the back. Those are off-duty police officers, but they're not working in an official capacity as a police officer. They're working as a security guard or a security officer. And I know LA PD, I don't know if they're still doing this, but they used to allow cops to work mall details and wearing their uniforms. Again, I don't know if they're doing that anymore. I don't think that's the smartest thing to do, to be honest with you. liability wise. But yeah, it is a thing, and a lot of the agencies will allow their officers to do that.
Do you actually earn more money as working private security versus being a police officer?
Well, I know ODO, they didn't pay as high wages as, San Diego PD paid. But I guess for me, my time off was way, way more important than making a few extra bucks. But I don't know. I mean, I can't speak for some of the other companies. I'm doubting, if you're doing things maybe like working for, say, a millionaire guarding their house, they may pay more hourly than their agency does. But I just think it's extra cash they're looking at. Now, a lot of agencies offer off-duty assignments that are overtime. And I know with San Diego PD, you were earning time and a half if you were doing that. They call it special events. So if we had a movie production in town and they needed, street closures or just a security presence, those would be uniformed police officers working overtime on their day off.
So let's move on to the next clip.
Is he a law enforcement officer?
How'd you get here? My car. You got any drivers? I lost it.
Do you have any weapons on you, sir?
Yes.
Okay, where's it at?
On my hip.
Okay, so we thought. Are you a police officer?
I'm not. No.
Okay, all right. What are you?
A federal marshal.
Okay, all right, that's what we had to ask.
You don't have an ID? No.
Okay.
So Greg, can you explain the difference there? He says, are you a police officer? He says, no, I'm a federal marshal. What's the difference?
Well, a federal marshal is a law enforcement officer, but they work for the federal government. So they're not a patrol officer. But if they're serving warrants, for example, they're going to be wearing, their vests or their raid jackets are going to say police on them. It's not going to say federal marshal. But yeah, that's a weird answer. If you were contacting a marshal and you ask, "Are you a police officer?" they probably wouldn't say no. I'm a federal marshal. But yeah, they work for it's a federal law enforcement agency. And one of the things that the federal marshals are doing is they're picking up fugitives all over the country and actually out of they're doing extraditions out of the country. So like
I don't know where this video is being taken place, but it looks like they're in some type of store.
Yeah, that's what it looks like.
If the guy's posing as a federal marshal, he shouldn't just be dressed in plain clothes, correct?
No, federal. It depends on what they're doing. If they are a federal marshal, they may be wearing plain clothes. But again, a federal marshal has a very specific badge. It looks much different than your typical police, municipal police badge. And he'll have some form of official identification with him or her. They're going to have ID. Even I've working patrol. I've been in contacting people in full uniform with my badge and everything, and I've been asked for my ID by citizens. Can I see your ID? So
okay, let's move forward.
We don't want you reaching for anything.
I'm not reaching for anything.
If you're a federal marshal, you understand what we're doing, right?
Absolutely.
You have your federal marshal ID?
So is that normal or not normal? The guy saying he doesn't have an ID. I'm going to assume you need your ID at all times, right?
Again, I just said that. If you're working, or definitely if you're carrying a gun off duty, you need to have your official ID with you at all times. So there's no excuse, none, zero.
No.
So you're carrying a weapon with no ID on you?
No. Because I just stepped out of my house to get this character.
Do you have a number we can call for your supervisor?
No.
Okay. I got to take this for you just for our safety.
Handcuff him.
For what?
Until we figure out what's going on. You have a weapon, you have no ID on you.
It's not a real weapon.
You're carrying a fake weapon.
Yeah. And you're a federal marshal.
No. He's got a little
Are
battery.
you not?
No.
Congratulations, you're just impersonating a police officer. That's a federal offense. Oh yeah. Congratulations. That's a felony.
Look it. I just.
Good eye, Alex.
Told you. Said keys.
What's the story? Why are you carrying around a fake gun?
I'm a limousine driver, I thought you were a federal marshal.
Hey, here, you got a badge that says U.S. Marshal. You're claiming to be U.S. Marshals. You have a badge. What does that say on it?
Marshal.
So why are we carrying around fake stuff? You know it's illegal.
No, I didn't know it was illegal.
Yes, you are displaying yourself as a law enforcement officer.
No,
We just asked you, are you in law enforcement? You said, yes, I'm a U.S. Marshal.
that's
illegal. That's a felony. Oh, absolutely not. We don't play around.
A lot of these guys that are impersonating officers, they've always wanted to be a cop, and maybe they tried to get hired by an agency, and for whatever reason they did not make it. And I know it's like San Diego, we have a real rigorous background. The process of getting hired with San Diego PD can take up to a year. And they go back 10 years into your background, you know, and look at your criminal background. They're talking, they're interviewing people in your lives, family, friends. And then they do a psych exam where, you know, it's a written, basically, exam that you take. Then that's reviewed by a psychiatrist who then interviews you. So you have to go to an interview with a psychiatrist. Then, of course, a polygraph and all sorts of things like that. And a lot of times, hopefully, usually, that'll catch these type of people. You know, we had can I tell a quick story involving this?
Yeah, absolutely.
So as you know, I teach at the police academy, and there are two types of recruits. There are sponsored recruits, and they've been hired by a police agency. So they're in there being paid to go through the academy, and they've got a job. You know, they're going to be police officers once they graduate. And then we have what we call open enrollees, and the academy is sanctioned through a community college. So these are essentially college students, and they're paying their own way through the academy. And we had an open enrollee recruit in one of the academies, this is several years ago, who he was, arrested and kicked out of the academy for this. But it turns out he was driving it was a Florida, a 5.0 Mustang. And back in this time, the CHP, the California Highway Patrol, they were driving 5.0 Mustangs. And he had a 5.0 Mustang. It was all black, and he had emergency lighting that he equipped it with. And he was making vehicle stops, impersonating an officer. He wasn't writing any tickets or anything. He was pulling these people over and then again lecturing them on their driving. And turns out that he had tried to get jobs with several of the agencies in the county, and he wasn't passing the psych exam on any of them. So I think it's, these agencies need to have that in place to catch people like this. But I think a lot of these guys that are doing that, impersonating officers, they're wannabe cops that just never were able to make the cut.
It's a little bit sad, eh?
Yeah, it is.
So let's move on to the next video.
I waved them down. He was going to kill everybody on the road.
Investigators say this body cam video clear evidence of a fake cop at work on the job he wasn't hired for.
Well, I'm off duty right now. I'm going home.
Westerville police say Brendan Conklin used this unmarked car to pull over a vehicle on South Cleveland Avenue. They believe it's not the first time he's done it.
This is the first that we're aware of. Now, we've already started our investigation. We do believe that there are other incidents that this person has been involved in.
Lieutenant Justin Alloway says Conklin claimed he was an off-duty officer, even flagging down real officers during this January 21st traffic stop. Inside the car, a police radio, dash cam, partition separating the front of the vehicle from the back, and a mounted shotgun.
So it was really believable.
Absolutely it was. And especially for someone that's being stopped by the vehicle, if you can't see the word police on the front, they're not going to see anything on the sides either. So they could have a real belief that it's a police vehicle.
At this point, investigators aren't even sure where he lives. Records point out he hasn't been truthful with that either.
We know his address that he listed on his registration was to Columbus Police Headquarters, and that's a privilege that's reserved for police officers to protect their home address. He had to file a paperwork with a BMV showing that he was a peace officer.
Can you explain that? I didn't really understand that, the privilege for the privacy of being a police officer. Can you get into a little bit more details about that, Greg?
Yeah, it's called a confidential registration on your car. And there are a lot of people that, hate cops and, would like to do harm to them or their home, their family. So what you can do is you file paperwork. it gets approved by the department, then it's turned over to the Department of Motor Vehicles. And then if a police officer runs your plate, it'll come back, like say mine, will come back confidential SDPD, San Diego Police Department. So it doesn't have my address or anything on the registration information right when the officer runs it. So it'll identify me as, you know, a police officer.
So it doesn't matter where you would be driving around the country, that data would be pulled up?
Yes, because if my plate's being run in, like, say Oregon, hypothetically, whatever, some other state, it has to go through the DMV in California for them to get the registration info.
So basically, he said, did I understand? He said it's a privilege, right? It's not a right?
I mean, it's for police officers. So yeah,
Okay.
I mean, you couldn't register your car as a, you know, what is it, a Mountie or whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's reserved for people who are actually police officers.
Okay.
And that was obviously fraudulently done, so that could rise to a felony charge in the future.
Word of the incident certainly a concern for drivers we spoke with.
I'll probably be scared for my life. I mean, this world's getting dangerous out here.
Lieutenant Alloway with a needed warning regarding traffic stops.
If you're not 100% sure it's a police officer, if you have concern about that, call 911 or pull into a police department if it's close.
If I didn't think I was doing anything wrong and it was isolated, I would slow down and I would keep going until I felt safe.
Conklin charged with, among other things, impersonating an officer. More charges could come. Westerville police urging anyone who's come in contact with him on the road to give them a call.
So, you know what I find interesting about this story? It seems like he got away and they don't know where he is. Normally, if someone is impersonating a cop, I guess they just have to go through the whole legal process.
Did he get away? Did this guy get away?
It sounds like it.
Okay.
It sounds like they're looking for him. So what is it? Someone impersonates a cop. They spend X amount of hours in jail. I'm going to assume they're going to have to pay like a bail to get out.
Well, it's a misdemeanor. I think what I was taking from is that he had been arrested and they were looking for more victims. Like, you know what I mean? But it's at least in California, it's a misdemeanor to impersonate a police officer. But it could be, you know, lead to other things. Like, for example, you handcuff somebody, you could be charged with false imprisonment. You know what I mean? If, you know, depending on how the interaction goes. But so it's a misdemeanor. You could get, in California, a misdemeanor carries up to 2 years in jail and usually a fine. It would have to be pretty bad as far as the interactions, you know, more than just pulling people over to go to jail, I think. But definitely there would be a fine and probation.
So can you just elaborate the differences between a misdemeanor and a felony?
Well, a misdemeanor, as far as the punishment, like I said, it could be up to 2 years in a county jail and then a fine. And depending on the crime, you know, the fine's up to the court. But and then a felony would be 2 years to, you know, the death penalty or life in a prison, either a state or federal prison.
And you said, like, did I hear correctly? You said up to 2 years in jail?
Yes.
Okay, so when is it that people go from jail to prison? Like, what are the different circumstances that would upgrade you or downgrade you from jail to prison?
You know, again, it's going to be a felony, and it's going to be more than 2 years served. You'd be going to a state prison.
If you commit a felony, it's minimum 2 years, correct?
Yes.
And then you go straight to prison. But if you commit a crime that is where the punishment is less than 2 years, you would be put in jail.
Yes. But then there's a lot of shuffling around. You know, a lot of states, California being one of them, is very much trying to keep the jail and prison populations down. So a lot of deals are made. You know, it may be, well, this guy that was arrested for this misdemeanor, He was being detained in jail for, let's say, 5 days while he was awaiting trial, and he was convicted. They would apply those 5 days to his sentence, and then the defense may even negotiate probation instead of serving out his or her term in jail. They'll be released, but they're on probation now. So if they violate the probation, they would go back to jail. That makes sense. There's a lot of shuffling, a lot of shenanigans going on in the court systems as far as, when it comes to punishing people for their crimes.
And would you say, based on what you know from experience, prison is way more violent and dangerous than jail?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, prison has the worst of the worst as far as the criminals, and they have the big yards, that a lot of violence occurs out in the prison yards. And it takes a lot of work to go to prison, and at least in California, you have to work to go to prison. So there's some bad people in prisons.
We got one more video, Greg.
What's going on, ma'am?
Somebody just hit us at the red light. This is my husband.
Is he okay? Sir? He in handcuffs? Why is he in handcuffs?
I can't answer no questions, sir.
Hold on 1 second. Leave him there. 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 Radio, can I get a photo of my location? I have a black male with lacerations to his face.
Got him the fuck out of there is what happened. Is what I would bet money on.
Who took the handcuffs off?
I don't know. Yo, whose car is this?
Huh?
Whose car is this? Hey, how did he wind up in handcuffs, Left? How did he wind up in handcuffs?
Sir, we just left the strip club.
Which strip club?
Peaches.
Peaches? Okay. I got you. Over on RDA?
Yeah.
I got you. Okay. Did you guys get into it with security over there?
Sir, I don't know.
Okay.
All I know is that's my husband.
Gotcha. Say less.
I'm going to grab your
Appreciate it.
I don't know.
Okay, that's fine. You're good. What's this? 1306 radio. Fuck around like you using car? What do you work for?
Homeland.
Okay. Did y'all have some shit up here a little bit ago? Male and female get into it with anybody?
Yeah. Sure
Left
did.
in a pair of cuffs?
Yeah.
Alright, what was the story with that?
They were just drunk.
Alright.
And
whose handcuffs is he wearing?
Mine. He took off. He jumped in the SUV and took off.
Yeah. I mean, it's Metro to Fair, so like almost down to 166.
Mm-hmm.
Wiped out real hard.
Man.
Hurt some people, hurt themselves.
Oh.
All right. Here's what I want you to do for me, okay? Here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna take your firearm off your side. Okay?
Okay.
You got just syrup out here?
Yes.
All right. Place that in my car. I'm gonna detain you for right now.
Okay.
All right?
Yeah, so the officer was doing a follow-up. If you remember, the guy who was in handcuffs' wife was in the back of a police vehicle and said, "We were at a strip club," and that was her husband that was handcuffed. So now what we just watched had jumped over to, I'm assuming, where the strip club is, and he's talking to this guy who is now posing as a DHS officer. And so it sounds like he put this guy in handcuffs for being drunk, and then they fled, and then they got into an accident. So he's hearing about the accident for the first time here, this fake cop. Yeah, it's wild.
So, yeah, and it says police on his back, right?
Yeah, it says police on his back, and actually on the front too, there's that American flag that says police.
So I wonder where he got that gear.
Amazon. I mean, well, again,
made in China.
Yeah, you can have anything embroidered, but yeah, there's websites, that specifically sell police gear and patches and everything. Now, like San Diego PD patches, we buy at like uniform stores, and they always want to see your ID before they'll give them to you. But and I'm sure stuff like that you can buy on eBay as well.
What about when the officer tells them, okay, I'm going to take away your firearm, and what else did he ask? His clip, I guess, in the back. Even if two legit officers were to interact with each other, if one cop asks another cop to remove his firearm, is that common? Like, can you request a police officer? Can a police officer request another police officer to give away their firearm?
The only reason that's happening is because he's smelling something very fishy. He's realized this guy's not a real cop, and so he wants to disarm the guy. But you would never, like, say if I were interacting as a San Diego police officer with a San Diego county deputy with the sheriff's department, I would under no circumstances say, hey, I'm going to take your gun off of you. I mean, I would never ask that. And if I did, they would never comply. They wouldn't give up their gun. So that's another clue that this guy's a fake cop. If I was working and a police officer was asking me to hand over my gun, I would say no, call for, and I would say, bring a supervisor in here, but he knows he's a fake cop and he just wants to disarm the guy. So that's what's going on.
Interesting. So what about, I mean, we're talking about fake cops, but just imagine a cop pulled over another cop and you smelled like alcohol in his breath. Would that be an instance where you could say, hey, please give me your weapon? Or would an officer call a supervisor and then the supervisor would tell him, give me your weapon?
Are you talking about like an off-duty officer who's smelling of alcohol?
Yeah, off duty or on duty, you never know, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a big deal. And you definitely get a supervisor on scene just to make sure there's a supervisor there. But I know, in San Diego, you don't get a free pass for, violating laws just because you're a cop. So they would get a supervisor on scene and run them through the process of evaluating whether or not they're DUI, driving under the influence.
And when it comes to supervisors, are supervisors normally staying in the office and then they only go out when they're being called, or do supervisors actually go around driving in the vehicle?
Well, that's going to vary from agency to agency throughout the country. I know in San Diego County, it's pretty standardized because, again, we go through all the same training. There's going to be a patrol sergeant will be the supervisor that's, supervising the patrol officers, and they're going to be out in the field, usually out driving a car, available to be, called over by their officers for assistance. So they'll be out in the field.
So just to put a nice bow to this whole conversation, if we're out on the street and you don't know if someone's a cop or if you're in your car, call 911 basically, right?
Yeah, the advice that was given on that one video before this one, and also what I said, call 911, I think, is the safest bet. If you're in doubt that the person trying to pull you over is a police officer, or the person you're interacting with is a real police officer, then just call 911.
Perfect.
And again, if you're being contacted by an officer, you're actually interacting with them, and you're having doubts, ask to see their ID. They have to have their ID with them.
Okay.
So,
and they legally have to show it to you.
Yes, they do.
As always, thank you for your great insight. If you're new to this channel, please subscribe and check out these other great videos.